Let me begin by thanking all of you, the organizers and the resource persons, for this great honor and for inviting me to speak for about. I'll bear in mind that this is Friday, and to commend the various panels for the excellent standard that I've seen and the work that has been done. Let me also thank all those who so far on the chat, and I'm sure there will be more, have been wishing me a happy birthday. I will not be able to reply to each and every one, but I thank you for the messages. Press Alaya Sakad Al Khairi. When I was told to speak about my journey across domains, I called Ibrahim yesterday and said, exactly what do you expect me to do? And he said what he would like me to do is to speak to the younger generation and see what kind of inspiration they could get from my own life experience and hopefully my mistakes. And maybe the best way to begin with the younger generation is to tell you about how my own earlier generation shaped my life and the role my father in particular played in shaping my life, and how maybe if we try to pattern our lives after some of those considerations, and at least for our children, we'll be able to get to the kinds of outcomes that we're seeing with the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I'll tell you a little bit about my father. As you know, my father, Chiroma, was a career diplomat. And in many ways, we are opposites. I'm more like my grandfather than my father, in the sense that I have been more committed to tradition, more interested in the traditional system than him. My father's experience, life, after he finished middle school and the College of Administration in Zaria, he went to work in the native authority system, as one would expect, as a prince. And he told me about this English teacher of his, Mr. Spot, who came to Kano and saw him working in the native authority system. And he said, I mean, what are you doing here? He said, I'm working. He said, no, you're not working. Your father is the emir. You're working for your father. This is not work. I mean, you are too brilliant for the system. If you stay here, your life will be limited. Your vision will be limited. Your scope will be limited. You need to get out. So based on the encouragement of this teacher of his, my father applied for a job in the Northern Regional Government. His mother was upset, obviously, because she was Wasoro, her son was a Chiroma. She wanted him to stay and learn the traditional system and maybe plan to succeed his father as emir. But my father wanted to go, and my grandfather said, look, let him go. He'll come back, Allah Zekye. And he went to work in the Northern Regional System. And he was posted to the office of the Premier. And this same teacher came once and saw him and said, I mean, what are you doing here? I said, I'm working. He said, no, you're not working, because the Premier is also your father. Ask him to post you to a ministry. He then told the Premier he wanted to go to a ministry. And the Premier's reaction was, Chiroma baka sang aiki deni. I said, no, Ranke, of course I like working with you. But right now, all I do is I do what you tell me to do. I want to be able to think and come up with ideas for you as Premier, so that I give you an input into policy. And that was how my father started working with the Ministry of Economic Development in the North. And then shortly after that, he got information that there would be an advertisement in 1956, and that the colonial government was going to recruit Nigerians to go and set up the Nigerian Foreign Service. And that was going to be a very competitive process, because out of the hundreds of applicants, only 12 would make it. He applied. And I mean, if you know my father was an extremely intelligent, hardworking person. And he was one of the 12. So this was the first batch of 12 career diplomats we had. They were called the 12 Apostles. And they were well trained. I mean, he went to Oxford University, he went to the London School of Economics, he went to Exeter. He was trained by British intelligence, and then he was given the task of setting up the Nigerian intelligence services. So if you go to the NIA road today, the NIA is called Ambassador Aminu Sanusi Road, because he was the one who established Nigerian intelligence services. So that's my father's background, that's his mindset. My father spent many years of his life thinking that the traditional institution would die. I mean, part of his training with the British was to serve in the British High Commission in India. And he saw all these Maharajas, who used to be in India, just living in palaces, drinking tea and doing nothing because of the success of democratic governments. And he used to say, that is the future of his family. So he never he never committed himself to it. So anyway, long and short of it was, given my father's background, given his experience in life, and given how he turned out later, because he left the system, went and rose to become an ambassador, became federal permanent secretary, and so on. From a very early age, he encouraged me to move away from my own immediate environment and to try to be a global citizen. So from the age of 8, with his support, I was taken to a boarding Catholic school in Kaduna, that was St. Anne's. I'm saying this, I'm weaving this story into my life story just to see how deliberate processes to shape life from an early age can influence outcomes later in life. So I was taken to Catholic school, and there's a funny story. When I graduated from the university in 1981, my father sent me a letter that was written to him by my mother in 1970, when I moved to St. Anne's, documenting her protest because she felt that his son and her son should not be taken to a missionary school. And if in the process I was converted to Christianity, she would not be accountable before God Almighty. Interesting letter. He never gave it to me until after I graduated, and he gave it to me and said, if I had listened to your mother, you would not be here. Anyway, so that was my first foray outside Kano, and he used to tell me, look, go and get an education, go out and build a life. You can always come back to the system. You were born into it. But if you think because you were born into a family, you have achieved anything, you have achieved nothing, because you did not choose your family. God put you there. You've got to do something for yourself. And from St. Anne's again, and he used to take us in the foreign service, but he used to take time and be interested in what I was doing. He came in and said, when you're in a good school, I want you to apply to King's College. I want you to go to Lagos. And that was how I got to KC. And I remember a particular conversation with my father when I went to Lagos. He was still in the foreign service. He was at that time our ambassador to China. My guardian was General Murtala Muhammad, who then became head of state and appointed my father federal permanent secretary. And then 6 months later, sadly, General Muhammad was assassinated. And so I then had, for the first time in my life, a semi-permanent interaction with my father. We were both in Lagos. I would see him today. And that was the period in which he spent a lot of time talking to me. But I remember a particular conversation I had with him, which registered in my mind and which I tell all my children. He said, look, I'm a prince. I'm the Chiroma. My father was an emir. But today, everybody says Ambassador Muhammadu Sanusi, Permanent Secretary, External Affairs. It doesn't matter who my father was or was not. I have joined the Foreign Service. I started from the bottom. I got to the top. I've achieved something in life. My hope for you, and my prayer for you, and my advice to you is that you do not live your life and end your life as Ambassador Sanusi's son. I want you, and this was a conversation I was having with me as a Form 3 boy. You have to set your mind on being something and being something independent of whose son you are. Go out into life, make your achievements, become whatever you want. And I think this is the first thing we need to tell all the young people. You must first of all be determined to make a name for yourself. And this name can be in anything, but it has to be something that you know will make you stand out, something that would give you your own persona, your own identity, your own status, independent of whatever. Now, obviously, we thank God for the privileges that we had and the opportunities that we had, but you want to make sure that you do not live and die, and all you are is, this is somebody's son. And my father said this because this is, if you come from a family like mine, you see that a lot. 99% of the members of the royal family are nothing except that they were born into a royal family. My father was this. If you take that away, nothing. No education and no skills, no contacts, no achievements. And my father was determined that his son would not be like that. And he kept stressing that this was what he wanted. And if I really wanted to please him, he wanted me to get out and try to build myself and my life. And this was an early influence, and it has determined and shaped my life and my attitude to life. The second conversation that I remember with my father that influenced me was in my teenage. And I was then, I must also say that I was one of those young, lucky people who moved very, very fast. So, I registered in the School of Basic Studies, Ahmadu Bello University, exactly on 31st July 1907, on my 16th birthday. And at that time, you could not go to university if you're not 18. That was, even the application form said if you will not be 18 by October, you need not apply. And I remember when I came to register, and the staff, the lecturer, saw my age. He said, "Well, you're 16. You can't come to SBS. You can't come to university." And I was there almost crying. He didn't want to register me. So he took me to later Professor Angulu, who was the principal of School of Basic Studies, Dr. Angulu, and said, "I have this young man from Kano. He's got the qualifications, but he's 16. And Dr. Angulu said, "Let me see your results." I said results, and I had my 8 credits. And he said to the lecturer, "Are you mad? So we're looking for students from Kano to admit. He has 8 credits. What's the use of all those old people who don't have 5 credits? Will you go and register him?" And that was how I got into SBS. Okay, basically they broke the rule. So I was in the university, but I was really too young to be in the university, which meant that my father had to continue treating me as a child a lot of the time, basically looking over me, encouraging and talking and asking questions. And I had all these dreams. Oh, I wanted to be the president. I wanted to be a professor. I wanted to be this. And And so this conversation, my father said to me, come, you know, in life, you can want to be anything, but your future is determined by God. My advice to you is to ask what kind of human being you want to be, and to identify 1, 2, maximum of 3 things that you want to hold on to throughout your life. And you will make a name for yourself. And he said, these things don't have to be complex. And it was, I mean, I'm right now in my house in Kaduna. This house was the house built by my father after he retired in Kaduna. So I can relive this conversation because we had it here. I came in from ABU to see him, and we sat like this, and he was chatting with me. He said, you know, do you know that if you just decide that in your life, you will never be late for an appointment. If you say 3 o'clock, it's 3 o'clock. If it's 5 o'clock, it's 5 o'clock. First of all, within a few weeks, everybody will know that you are never late for an appointment. And if you keep to that, just to that, for the rest of your life, everybody will remember you as that person who was never late for an appointment. And that is how you make a name for yourself. It's not by being this, by being that. There are many people who are ministers. Now you've forgotten them because you can't remember what they did. You can't remember who they were. People who were ambassadors, people who were governors. Maybe you read the history, but those who have recollection, you remember that they were in that office, but they can't remember anything about it. Or if you can decide you just want to wear sparkling, clean, white clothes all the time, and you're always neat. Do you know that even after your death, people will talk about you and say, you know what? He was always in sparkling white. He was always clean. So you have to decide for yourself what you want to be. And it is difficult because if you say you want to keep an appointment all the time, it is difficult. You'll have to do it all the time. If you want to be clean all the time, it is difficult. If you want to be honest all the time, it is difficult. If you want to be bold all the time, it is difficult. But you have to decide for yourself what you want to be. And I believe based on this conversation and the kind of challenges I faced in life, at some point, I don't know exactly when, but at some point, I came to the conclusion that the one thing I wanted to be was to be somebody who always spoke truth to power. I mean, at that time, I didn't know the name was truth to power. Later, it was, of course, later in social theory with Michel Foucault and discourse analysis that those terms came, but that was basically what it was. And that was basically how I came to define myself. And that meant for me, being MD or being governor or being emir or being Khalifa, those are roles that Allah places you in. You may get there or you may not get there. You have no control over. But my commitment was that anybody who's known me from those days in university to now will say that has been the constant in my life. And that is how I hope I will continue to live my life. And I hope I'll be remembered after my death. Not, yes, I was emir, I was governor, I was this, I was that, but I would like to be remembered first and foremost as somebody who always spoke truth, even at great risk. This is really what shaped my life. This is what set me on my course. And what that means is that at every point in my life, I have been ready to sacrifice position, to sacrifice wealth, to sacrifice popularity, whether with the powerful or with the people, in order to remain true to that one thing which I have defined myself as. So I defined myself as that. That is my choice. And that is more important to me. Being that is more important than anything else. People may want you to be something. People may want you to remain in a position, but that's people wanting to remain in a position. But if it came to a choice between holding on to that position and doing what I thought was right, or saying what I felt was truth, I would. And as I said in a recent interview, if you're a prince and you choose to keep quiet because you're afraid, you're not a prince, you're a coward, you're a slave. So real freedom lies in the ability to express what you see as the truth. Now, you may be wrong, but this is your own conception of the truth. So that has been, for me, the underlying, driving, defining characteristic of my life. Now, each of you will have to decide for himself what he wants, okay? But just know that holding on to it consistently will always be a challenge. It needs perseverance, it needs patience, it will come with risks. But at the end of the day, I have never lost anything. I've gone through all sorts of challenges. Some of them people don't even know, and I may discuss some of them today. Okay, so and really, I came to this decision having realized that this was my nature. I led my first riot, if you'd call it a riot, when I was in St. Anne's. I've told this story before. I was 8-9 years old. We used to have these provisions. When you go to a boarding school, you have provisions. And St. Anne's used to be a girls-only school before it became mixed. So we used to keep our provisions in bulk kept in the girls' dormitory. And then on Saturday, we would go, the keys were with the matron, would go open our boxes and take our provisions. And we had this matron who just took it upon herself to open any child's box that she wanted, take his biscuits, take his provisions, and nobody was talking. And we kept talking about ourselves and saying, look, this is not right. This is not right. So one day when we opened our provisions and I saw things missing, I said to her that I was missing some things. And I remember she said, are you accusing me of stealing? And I said, yes. And she gave me a slap. And I said I was going to report to the headmistress. And I remember the first person that said, I'll go with you, was somebody called Yusuf Pam. Yusuf Pam is my friend. He was he was commissioner for justice in Plateau State. He's still around. A very good friend of mine, Colonel Pam's son, and he was my number 2. So he always tells people that I taught him how to demonstrate when he was 9 years old. So I led, and I was the smallest boy in the class. Okay, I led that protest. Now, obviously, I got punishment for calling the matron a thief. But after that, nobody lost its provisions. And everybody came to thank me. And I realized from that very young age that all it takes for change to happen is for somebody to have the courage to confront powerful people. I was a class 4 boy in a primary school and was able to confront a matron over an injustice. And yes, I was slapped. Yes, I was punished for calling her a thief, but that brought an end to the injustice. And those experiences went with me throughout my life. Now, obviously, they've not all been very good experiences. When I was in the university, I got myself involved in practically every demonstration. 1977, we're part of the Ali Moscow demonstrations. Some of my friends were killed. The next year, we're all part of the JAM demonstrations when we're in the first year in university. The next year, we were among the MSS students who went around Zaria writing Islam only, following Ibrahim Ezekzaki and declaring that we wanted an Islamic state, and this system was all kafirci. I remember we all went in front of the palace of Zazzau. Zakzaki said, Shagari kafiri ne, muka ji Shagari kafiri ne, Sarkin Zazzau kafiri ne, Sarkin Musulmi. We did all of that. And the final year, the rice riots. There were 4 major demonstrations, one every year when I was in UBA, and I was part of every demonstration. I was a member of the Students Representative Assembly in my SBS. It was actually because of us, those of us who in SBS were the majority who led AB into the Ali Must Go riots, that they introduced a rule that you had to spend at least a year in the university before contesting for the SRA. But that's a different story. Anyway, so I went through university, and my initial objective, my initial aim in life was to be a professor. So immediately after NYSC, I went back for my master's. I did the coursework. I started teaching. And I don't know if ABU has changed now, but the postgraduate work, at least in the Faculty of Arts and Social Science where I was so horrible that you'd go for a master's and you'd be expected to spend maybe 3-4 years. I mean, advertised as a 1-year program. Then when you've registered, you find that no one has actually completed a master's in less than 4 years or 5 years in the university. So I said to myself, I would not spend more than 2 years writing a master's thesis. If I didn't complete the thesis, I was going to leave. And in the second year of my thesis writing, we had a change in supervisor, and General Buhari had a coup, came into power, and then announced that the federal government would no longer provide fellowships for academics who were going for doctorate degrees abroad unless those degrees were not available in Nigerian universities. And for those of you who are academics, you know that in those days, the major incentive for being a lecturer was that you would be sponsored to go and do a PhD in America or in the UK. And once that option was not there, I decided that I didn't want to PhD in Nigerian university and I was not going to stay any longer. So I applied for a job with Icon, which is a merchant bank. And this was my first real challenge because at that time, Icon had a rule. If you had a master's degree, you'd come in as an officer. If you had a bachelor's degree, you'd come in as an assistant officer, and you would need like 3 years to get a promotion. So when I did my interview, the head of HR called me and said, look, you know, you haven't completed your thesis, so you're an assistant officer. Why don't you take another 6 months to 1 year, complete your thesis, come in as an officer, where you save yourself 2 years? And I said no. I had made up my mind I was leaving. I would come in as an assistant officer. And there were 13 of us in that set, 6 Northerners, and Mukhtar Ahmad was then the MD of Icon. And, you know, Nigeria has changed and improved a lot. But way back in 1980, in southern Nigeria, that Northerners were daft, Northerners were illiterate, Northerners only got to places because of culture system. And so when we came in with 6 Northerners, they decided that, you know, they wouldn't put us straight into banking. That set, that cohort, 13 of us, would be put through a 4-month induction program. And only after that, so we went into the induction program. And I could see that there was a general attitude to us coming from the North. And you know, having been to King's College, I knew I could understand some of this some of the nuances of the conversation. Anyway, be that as it may, we were 6 assistant officers and 7 officers in that cohort. So I made sure I had to prove to them that Northerners were not daft, and I came first at the end of the course. And we then had to choose where we wanted to work. And I asked to go to corporate finance. And again, in ICON, finance department was the elite department, and only people who were officers could go to corporate finance. No assistant officers would go to corporate finance. So the head of HR went to the head of corporate finance, who was then Mr. Fashina, later became Commissioner of Finance in Lagos State, Mr. Tunde Fashina, and said to him, "Sir, we have a problem." So this boy, this man Sanusi, is an assistant officer. He wants to work in corporate finance, and you don't take anybody here unless they are officer level. And the problem is that he came first in the course. So Mr. Fashina said, "Were there officers on that course?" She said, "Yes, there's 7 officers and 6 assistant officers." I said, and the man came first. She said, "Yes." "And you're telling me you won't give him to me, the person who came first in the class, because is he not better than all those officers there?" So I was the first assistant officer to work in corporate finance in ICON. And again, those things basically continue. And I'm saying this because, and I'll get to the point, I'll explain to you why I'm stressing this. So I got to corporate finance, and we're in units. So we had issuing houses, and there are 3 in an issuing house. My issuing house was headed by a senior manager called Mr. Chukam Banefo. Then there was a deputy manager called Remila Saki, and then I was there as an assistant officer. And I don't know if you know the Bank of the North building in Kano, which is now Skyline University. Okay, so just for you to have an idea, I raised the money. I raised a debenture that built the Bank of the North building. Now, that was our issuing house work. And we also raised debentures for Peugeot Automobile and so on. Anyway, so what then happened was, and you know, fortune has a way of smiling. Every time you find yourself in a situation, it's of crisis, it's an opportunity, and you never know what God has planned for you. But what you need to do is face it and just do your best. And then at the end, you'll be surprised. So we were having the Peugeot Automobile debenture. And for those of you who understand banking, there's something called a completion, which when you're going out to the capital market for an issue. And then my head of unit went on leave to the UK. The number 2 fell sick, and Peugeot Automobile called and said they wanted a completion board meeting. So here I was, an assistant officer. I was the only person in the unit. I had never done an issue. And the general manager comes and says, "You have a completion board meeting. It's been called for 3 weeks from now." And I said, "But sir, there's nobody. My bosses are not here." He said, "What do you mean there's nobody? Aren't your body?" So I've nobody. He said, "Well, that's why I'm here." So basically, this is called throwing somebody into the deep. So without any solution, just me and working directly with the general manager, I prepared all board documents, and I ran a completion board meeting with a board of Peugeot as an assistant officer. Mr. Fashina just threw me into the deep end and watched me. So this was within 6 months of joining ICON. So it came to time for confirmation, which is what happens if you spend a year you get confirmed. Mr. Fashioner said Sanusi should be confirmed as an officer. He should have come in as an officer in the first place. So within 1 year of joining the bank, I did away with the disadvantage of not having completed a thesis and became an officer. And because I continued working hard, Mr. Fashioner continued standing behind me, and I kept getting accelerated promotions, so that by the time, in Icon, you would need 3 years as an assistant officer, 3 years as an officer, 3 years as an assistant manager, 3 years as a deputy manager. That'll be 12 years before you get to be a manager. I was joined Icon as an officer in 1985. Within 6 years, I was a manager. Half of that time, I think I spent only 6 manager or something, because Mr. Fashioner just kept saying no. He's got to move on. It was all merit. So you had this person who was a Christian, who was Yoruba, who didn't know me from anywhere, and who basically stood behind me and fought my corner and insisted that since I had worked hard and I was competent, I deserved promotions. And those kinds of influences influence your life. You understand that, you cannot basically show preference to people because of where they come from, because you were also a beneficiary of a cosmopolitan, open-minded person who was able to stand behind you and promote you, and make sure that you got what was due to you, even more than was due to you in your life. So again, these are all learning points from father, leaving my environment, going to St. Anne's where I made Christian friends, going to King's College where I made Southern and Christian friends, coming to a place like Icon where I saw good people. And it tells me that, look, this idea that we as Nigerians think of ourselves in terms of us versus them, North versus South, Muslim versus Christian. Every individual is an individual. You can be Christian, you can be Yoruba, you can be Igbo, you can be Hausa, you can be Muslim. You're either a good person or a bad person. And one of the abiding commitments I have always had is to judge individuals as individuals, not as part of a group. And I'm very suspicious of any attempt to see people and essentialize people and say, oh, because he's a northerner, he is good, or because he's a southerner, he's bad, or because he's a Christian, he's bad, or because he's a Muslim, he's good, and basically look at the values by which people live. And all of have in my life and my relationships. Okay, but back to my truth to power and the fact that as a credit officer in a bank, you would have times when the management has a friend and they would like to give him a loan, and you do the analysis and you find that you have questions about the loan. And even though you know that your boss wants it, you write your report and say you do not recommend the loan. And as a credit officer, I had that. Now, what would happen was that management would start sending loans that they want approved to people who they know would recommend, okay, and bypass you. But at the end of the day, surprisingly, they would promote you. Someone said me 20 minutes left. Okay, so I've got to be careful. So so the lesson is that standing by what you believe in has never hurt. People talk about me. They say I've caused so much trouble. I'm too controversial. I fought this. I fought that. It's not good. And I don't know. I look at my life and I say, I've been a chief risk officer, which would be a fulfillment to most people as an ED in a bank. I've been a bank CEO, which for many people, that is the greatest achievement in their lives. I have been the governor of a central bank. I've been an emir. I'm the Khalifa of Tijaniya, which is only the third Khalifa since 1965. And I don't know why anybody would say that it has not worked. I think, frankly, it has, yes, it's been difficult. I've had to overcome challenges, but those challenges have only strengthened me. So I will fast forward to some of the challenges, some of the difficult decisions I took. Now, you want me to talk about moving across domains. The first thing to note is that if you actually want to move across domains, you've got to prepare yourself for competence in each of those domains. You need that breadth. So I have always wanted to be an emir, but I also wanted to be an emir like my grandfather. I wanted to be an emir that would stand up on the pulpit and give a sermon. I wanted to be an emir that could speak Arabic. And while I was working in the bank, I continued going to study. I remember I had, when I was in Icon Kano, I had this situation where I would wear my suit early in the morning after Fajr prayer, and I'd go to Imam Mahmoud, Imam Yola at that time, and I was studying the Muqtasar. So he would sit at 6:30 in the morning in his class so that I would come and take my lesson before going to the bank. Then at the end of the day, after Maghrib, I would go to Masalachim Waje to Liman Kulia to read my to do my tahfidh of Quran and also read my Riyadus Salihin. The stress got too much for me. I could not combine working in the bank and my passion for Islamic studies. So I took a decision that I would set banking aside. And it was difficult because I was an area manager in Icon. I was 30 years old. I was an area manager. All the managers in Icon were like 37, 38. And my father, and I mean, everybody could not believe that I would set that aside. In fact, my third, I had been so spoiled by life. I had achieved so much at a young age that I was trying to throw everything away. But I wanted to have that knowledge. I wanted to prepare myself for those roles. And you've got to prepare, you've got to think years and years and years ahead. You can't guarantee that you'll be there, but you want to make sure that if you are called upon, you can. If you don't know how to read the Quran, if you don't know Arabic, you cannot start learning how to give a khutbah when you're an emir. You've got to get ready, get yourself ready for that role and prepare yourself for that role. And I have never accepted a role for which I'm not prepared, which is why when people say go into politics, I say no, because I have never prepared myself for politics. I am not interested. If I was interested in it, I would have prepared myself for politics a long time ago, but I never did. I prepared myself for banking. I prepared myself for academia. I prepared myself for a traditional leadership role. And I know that I had the skills and had invested the time in my own education preparation so that I would do it. Because the last thing you want is to have a role that you cannot do very well. So I went to the Sudan first to study Arabic. It was supposed to be just a 1-year Arabic program. I went to do my Arabic program. And then the Sudan was at war. And everything was cheap. I realized that with $300 a month, I could live with my family, accommodation, feeding, everything. And I said, well, you know what? $3,000, $4,000 a year, $16,000 max. I could do a 4-year degree. And I came back to my work and then resigned after my Arabic class and said I was going to do a degree in Sharia and Islamic law. That wasn't the initial plan, but it was when I realized that I could do that on low income. I just came and looked for the money. I had enough money for 2 years. I resigned. I said, if after 2 years I run out of money, I come back. Otherwise, if I get more money, I'll continue. And with God's help, I was able to complete my degree. Now, when I took the decision to go to the Sudan, people said to me, "You will never get a job in banking." And you know what? Before I finished my study in the Sudan, I had an offer letter to work in UBA. It was in my hands. When I came back from Sudan, I already had a job. So by the time I came back from the Sudan, within 2 weeks, I was working in UBA in Lagos. People didn't know how I got. I just came on a holiday, met the chairman of UBA at a dinner. He was so impressed. He said, "Come and do an interview." So if you rely on your own competence, if you rely on your own strength, you would always find a role for yourself. But you've got to invest in yourself intellectually. You've got to invest in yourself, and you've got to work very hard. So it was around that time that I faced some of my what was one of my most severe challenges, which this is the first time I'm going to talk about this publicly. I usually don't because my father forbade me from talking about it. In the years I was in Sudan, I was very radical from a young Islamic perspective, basically thinking that the entire system was rotten. But taking my inspiration from Islam, I was also very critical of the military administration, very critical of dictatorships, supportive of human rights and progressive ideals. And this was the days of General Abacha. And in 1995, when I came in, and obviously that meant senior members of my family were not happy with me because they felt I was too critical of what I said was their complicity and their alliance with an undemocratic regime. The government was not happy with me, and I was a marked man. In 1995, there was a religious riot in Kano over somebody who was said to have defaced the Quran. I had nothing to do with it. I had no role there. I was in the mosque on that day. That was all. But that was the opportunity that people took to punish me and teach me a lesson for being too critical. Long and short of it, as a result of that, without trial, without going to court, without being told what I had done, I spent 11 days in a police cell in Bompai. And from there, I was taken under Decree 2 as a threat to national security. And I spent 333 days in Sokoto prison on detention. Through this huge conspiracy that later was unveiled, and we knew all those that were involved and all that. Anyway, after 1 year in prison, I was sold. I was released. No, and then, and this is the interesting part. The government went and cancelled every single record of my detention because they were worried that I would sue them to court. And that helped me because then it means whenever anybody came to appoint me to a position, there was no record that I was ever a threat to national security, and therefore I passed all the security checks, even though the intention then was to stop me from suing them. Anyway, so I came out from prison, a very angry man, ready to fight my family, ready to fight the system, ready to fight everybody. And my father called me and he said, if you have a problem with anyone or confront anyone or say anything to anyone over what happened to you, I will never forgive you. Said, it has happened. Leave it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Forget it. And it's strange in life because the uncle of mine who actually made the phone call and handed me over to the police for arrest was to come and kneel in front of me and greet me as his emir later in life. So my father was right. So this is again experience that has shaped my life, that you'll be the victim of an injustice, no matter how grave the injustice. If you're able to rise above it, to forgive, to forget, to ignore, you will only rise in life. Um, this was, I think, a severe experience. But you see, it was training. When you spend, there is no punishment that man has created for man that is more severe than putting him in prison. But within that prison, if you are not guilty, and with the help of God, you have, those were some of my happiest moments. That was the time I completed my memorization of the Quran. I set up a school. It was it was like I was living in a place. I was living somewhere. I didn't think of it as a prison because I had done nothing wrong. I had not been charged with anything, and victim of injustice. Having what central bank or being removed, you've already gone that fire. I came out of that and then came in and went a chief risk officer, MD, went on to be central bank. You to someone take these, you find it's like service, a change of. So surprised at between domains and move between roles that I'm prepared. And so even when I was in banking, I used to write. 1999, 2005, I was involved in huge debates. You may not agree with as a public intellectual. Those debates have been put, which I'm going to present on the 24th of August for the good of the nation. But that meant I already links with academia. So the academia was always an option. I have never lost that. While I was in banking, I was still involved in traditional systems. I wanted to leave the option of being the aim. It was so easy for me to move from being an AMA because I prepared myself for the role. Easy for me, the moment to go to university, I started writing a book because I had always controlled my academic life. So it's like it's like a transfer of service for me. I never see it as a fall from grace. The only fall for me would be if I sacrifice my principle. It would be if I refuse to speak the truth. And, recently Kano was on a channel's TV and he was going about me being a social critic. I have never commented on it, and I will not comment because it's not important. I look at my CV. God has made me a CRO. God has made me an MD. God has made me governor of central bank. God has made me an emir. God has made me the Khalifa. I have nothing but happiness and gratitude to God. But like I said, those posts are not important. The positions are only as important as what you do with them. It is what you bring to them. And that, for me, holding on to that truth, holding on to that definition of truth, whether you're on the throne or in a prison or facing the government or facing your family, holding on to that which you see must be said, especially in the interest of society and the general good. That is how I have defined myself. Obviously, I've got my weaknesses. Nobody's perfect. And I know there are people beside me who think I'm arrogant, who think I'm snobbish. Some people think I know too much. Some people think I'm too argumentative. But nobody can accuse me of being a coward, and nobody accuse me of refusing to speak the truth because I'm confronted with power. And so long as that is the case, I think I have achieved what my father wanted me to achieve for myself. I've become what he wanted me to become. And I urge each and every one of you to decide what you want to be, how you want to lead your life, and have the courage and the perseverance to stick by it. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so very much, Your Highness. I think we've had enough time, and that was so insightful, very inspirational. We are so grateful, Your Highness. In the meantime, I want to confirm if Dr. Abdullahi Tahiru is here as a panelist, please, because he would be the one to give a 5 minutes vote of thanks and final remarks on behalf of the Central Organizing Committee. Dr. Abdullahi Tahiru, are you here, please? Please confirm if you are here, Doctor. Dr. Abdullahi Tahiru is here. Please, on behalf of the Central Organizing Committee, your vote of thanks and final address. So, I mean, closing remarks, please. Thank you. Alaikum assalam. Please go ahead. We can hear you.
I'm given a typical tax and in the vote of thanks and remarks, especially to speak.
We can barely hear you, Dr. Abdullahi. Maybe you bring yourself closer to the microphone. Yes, please.
Okay. Are you hearing me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. I said I am given a difficult task of seeing the vote of thanks and final remarks, especially to talk after this long lecture delivered by His Highness. Actually, it has been a very rewarding day. We had 5 sessions that included access to justice, SDG, entrepreneurship and innovation, gender and family responsibility, and 21st century innovation. Let me first start by extending our profound appreciation and thanks to His Highness for first agreeing to even obliging to our request for the conduct of the colloquium. Actually, the colloquium started from a Facebook discussion where some fans of His Highness were discussing his achievement, and then it occurred to us that his 60th birthday, it's around the corner, so it was conceived to celebrate the birthday in form of a colloquium. His Highness was approached and he obliged to our request, so we thank him for that. Secondly, we also like to thank him for being part of this August event, and also for delivering the talk titled "My Journey Across Domains." I'm sure many people have benefited immensely from the story of His Highness. The summary of it is that we should all prepare ourselves for roles, and also we should have a principle. Summary of it, principle of His Highness is saying truth to power. And we also learned that if you stick to that principle, you will never lose. You will get rewarded later in life. So on behalf of the organizing committee of Muhammadu Sanusi annual colloquium, we thank His Highness for being part of this occasion. And I want also to thank the moderators and also the resource persons that participated in 5 sessions. Let me first start with my friend